the question for me is what next? And it is one of the things I thought, like, okay, if you could bring back direwolves, that extinct animal, what's gonna be next? Next is Jurassic Park, exactly what that they were doing in the movies, because there's fossils of dinosaurs that most likely you could find a way to genetically make a dinosaur again. And would it be a park would want to go to? Hell yeah, I'm gonna go.
There you
But
go.
I gotta watch a lot of Jurassic Park to sort of prep myself of what to do when this goes bad. All right, welcome everyone to another episode of Banter on the Rocks. Today is Monday, April 7th, and today on today's show we have quite a bit to talk about. It has been a slower sports week. As it is, it's Monday. We just finished watching March Madness, the final, so we'll do a little March Madness recap. There has been some news also, related to March Madness and college sports, NIL updates. So we'll talk a little bit about that article we read today, and then we'll go into some banter gossip. Baldoni Lively. We talked about it last week. The documentary on Max that was out there, so we watched some of it. So I want to take give you guys a little bit of our takes of it, and then also Firefest 2. Billy McFarland back at it again, and a lot of different contradicting, I would say, articles. People saying yes, it's happening, and people saying, or I think the only one saying yes is Billy McFarland. But we'll talk a little bit more about that, yeah, a little later on the show today, and just whatever else pops up, during the episode. Um, but before we get on with the episode, we want to discuss our brand ambassadorship. As always, we are brand ambassadors for Find the Good brand. Find the Good is focused on the good and building a community of people who want to help find the good. So for all purchases, Find the Good gives back 10% to Mental Health um, of America organization. And when you order and use our promo code BANTER805, you will receive 10% off your purchase. So that's 10% for you, 10% back to mental health. So remember to use the code BANTER805 for 10% off. And the mission for Find a Good is very simple. Find a Good is here to get you through the bad days, the breakups, the ups and downs, and whatever else stands between you and a smile on your face. So Find a Good. We're here, the brand, us, we're here to get that smile on your guys' face, find the good, even no matter what you may be going through, because mental health it's an important piece of society and life, and we want you guys to do well. So find a good. Use code banter805. um so to get started, we'll go into our banter drinks of the week, and today I have passion fruit with tequila. So my parents have a passion fruit tree, and it started sprouting. So they made homemade natural passion fruit. So got some of that this weekend from them when I was over there, and with always a good trusty Dos Hombres tequila.
There you go. I'm jealous. Yeah, this week it's passion fruit. Last week it was Jamaica, right? Or 2 weeks
Jamaica.
ago.
Hmm.
Yeah, yeah. You're bringing out all the stops here, John. Makes me
Yeah.
seem a little bland. But yeah, I'm going gin and tonic.
Gin and
Nice and
tonic.
cold, refreshing.
Uh-huh.
Working my way through that Japanese gin.
Yeah.
Been delicious so far. But yeah, no, keeping it simple in
Nice.
a good way.
Hmm. It's never a bad thing, keeping it simple, keeping it the
Hmm.
classics. They're classics for a reason, and they're classics because they're good. So
Yeah.
uh, I don't think many people will complain about it. But yeah, awesome.
No.
As always, and if there's any drink companies, people trying to start up and want us to sort of shout out your beer, like let us know. We're willing to work together. Like I said, we enjoy alcohol. We're probably not as much of drinkers as we were probably in our younger 20s.
Thousand
But
percent.
we still like to enjoy the drink, especially during banter on the rocks and hanging out with friends. Holidays are coming up, so there'll be
Yeah.
some family get-togethers that will be enjoying some nice, cool, refreshments.
Absolutely. Those come in clutch for those moments. There's no doubt.
Yeah. All right. So we'll go into our banter takes. And as always, banter takes, it's our takes that we share with each other. We don't really discuss them beforehand or share with each other. We'll go off of what Tim sends me, I send Tim, and it's our take for the year or until it gets proven right or wrong. So my first take, Ovechkin's scoring record is a much more impressive accomplishment compared to LeBron's scoring title. Um, I think it is
Wow.
just because of the physicality of hockey. Hockey, I think, is not an easy sport where I'm not trying to bash basketball because basketball, as a professional, not an easy sport. But some of the hits you take in hockey, um, if you take a small little touch in the NBA, you're already flopping and falling on the floor and not getting up for quite a while. Where in hockey, you break your teeth, you get pucks to the face, and you go to the bench, get, stitches, get taped up, and then you're back out there. So what Ovechkin has done, I think, is a lot more impressive. I think the amount of games they play is, correct me if I'm wrong, Tim, somewhat similar. It's not like, baseball where there's 120. I think hockey has about, is
Yeah.
it like 80
I
something, 60?
I think
Like,
so. I'm gonna look that up right now. I know you're right. It is very similar.
yeah, like I
Um
said, NBA still might have a few more games, but hockey's on par with them, so not too far off. I'm gonna assume
yeah, it's
S-
82 games.
82 games, so it's same amount.
Yep.
And like I say, they play a tougher sport, in my opinion, because the skating, you have to have talent skating backwards. Um, I've seen it. I remember when I used to roller skate, wanting to play hockey, skating backwards was my worst skill where I'd always fall and just land on my ass. So I think Ovechkin's scoring record is so impressive, beating Gretzky, and it sort of goes into one of my takes for you, Tim. Ovi, you know. Uh,
Perfect.
yeah, so but yeah, I truly think it's a lot more impressive than LeBron's. And like I said, nothing against LeBron. Um I also think the amount of years LeBron has played, it's close to the same as Ovi. I feel like they
Hmm.
were all coming up around the same time. So um like I said, from the way I've seen Ovi this year, I don't know if he'll play another year. I think he's gonna hang it up. But overall, great, great accomplishment, and yeah, better than LeBron's scoring title. What do you think, Tim?
Yeah, no, I definitely agree. Very similar career-wise, I feel like. I think LeBron went into the league in 2003, if I'm not
Hmm.
mistaken. Ovechkin entered the league in 2004. They were both first round, first picks
Hmm.
overall. Overall, I completely agree, though. I think Ovechkin surpassing Gretzky as all-time goals scorer. I think that's just it's a bigger feat in my eyes. I think physicality wise, kind of like what you brought up.
Hmm.
Um, you know, LeBron, of course we see, flopping left and right from him. And,
Yes.
a lot of people showing highlights of him, jumping up and down on the sidelines, kind of throwing hissy fits here and
Hmm.
there, complaining for calls. Ovechkin, from my understanding, I think he broke his leg earlier this
Yeah.
season. Continued to go on. I think he has 42 goals on the season.
Hmm.
He's just, yeah, it is 42 goals, 69 points altogether. He's just what all encompasses like an NHL hockey player.
Yeah.
It's you fight through everything. He's been playing with like a missing tooth for his whole
Yeah.
career. He just they're just all badass.
Yeah.
It's and then looking at the stats though, and the similarities of Wayne and Alex Ovechkin, the way that they kind of, I don't know, set their goals. It's super similar. So
Hmm.
they each have 1,487 games played.
Hmm.
They so it took, pretty much, yeah, same amount of time for them to get pretty
Yeah.
much the same exact spot. The biggest differentiator though is the points. Gretzky has
Hmm.
them. destroyed. I don't know
Yeah.
who's going to catch up to that record. Because yeah, assists 724 for Ovechkin,
Hmm.
1,963 for Gretzky. So,
Yeah.
all around player, obviously Gretzky did a lot more in that time, but at the same time, that feat of the goal scored is a tremendous
Yeah.
accomplishment. And another crazy thing is too, is from my understanding, they broke the record in the same exact against the same exact team, the Islanders.
Oh, did
So
they? Oh, that's
they
crazy.
did. So it's just a crazy,
Yeah.
history upon history. So it's eerily similar. Years ago, Wayne
Hmm.
had an interview that I saw that he said, he felt great, obviously, about breaking the record, and he hopes one day if somebody breaks his record, he'll be there for it. And that's
Hmm.
man of his word. He was there. Congratulated Ovechkin, but tremendous accomplishment.
Hmm.
I don't want to take away from LeBron either. Obviously, he's
Yeah.
amazing. He has, 5 platinum hits, song wise now, just based off of his name. We'll see what they do. We're getting close to playoff time here, but that's another one that's an amazing feat. I definitely don't want to take away from that, but I
Oh,
think
yeah.
physicality wise, it's killer. Like
Yeah.
just hockey players are different. We've talked about that on this show a
Hmm.
lot. It's crazy. But
Yeah.
congratulations to Ovechkin, tremendous feat. Really cool to
Yeah.
watch. Hell of a goal. Oh yeah,
Yeah,
and
it
then one
was.
last point on it. He said he didn't want to do it open goal.
Yeah,
So
the
he
game
did it.
before, I think, so
Yeah.
kudos to him because he could have done it easily and then
Hmm.
just cruise the rest of the season. So yeah, no, I thought that was awesome. I sent you my take for you because you sort of talked about it. But one
Yep.
thing before we go to that take, I looked up missed games from Ovi and LeBron.
Mm.
So Ovi, over his 20-year NHL career, he's only missed from what Google pulled up, 75 games, whereas
Wow.
LeBron over 20 years has missed a total of 169 games. So
Wow.
doubled the miss amount. That shows still LeBron great, missing so many games, so able to break the record, but Ovi's done so much more,
Yeah.
and for a sport that requires a lot more physicality.
Absolutely. Yeah, no,
Hmm.
that's crazy. That's a really good stat. Glad you pulled
Hmm.
that up.
Yeah.
That's interesting. Different breed.
Yeah.
We've
Yeah.
said it continuously. But yeah, kind of going into my take here that you sent me, John. Ovechkin broke Gretzky's goal record, but Wayne Gretzky is still the best. Exactly. Yeah, no, it's the same sentiment that we just discussed.
Hmm.
Points wise, it's second to
Yeah.
none. It's kind of like a Jerry Rice record.
Yeah.
It's one of those things where you feel like people may come close, at first, but it's dicey from there on out. I
Yeah.
actually saw something today on Sports Center. They were kind of talking about like who's the next possible person to come break Ovechkin's record now, and the big
Yeah.
name is Austin Matthews,
Hmm.
and I don't know where he's at right now, but I do obviously know the name. Tremendous player,
Hmm.
was a big part of that the Four Nations Cup
Yeah.
this year. So, we'll see. It's really fun to watch these up and coming players come and, try to break these
Hmm.
records. And, something just came to mind actually, John.
Hmm.
Out of a lot of records, is there something in particular, like whether it's this goal record now, or is there any record in sports history that you feel like might just be too tough to pass?
Um, I think it's the NBA scoring in a game record, the 100. I
Oh,
think
there you go.
that's one that it's just going to be too hard the way the game is played. I think Kobe was the next one that got the closest with what
Hmm.
was it, 80,
81.
81,
Hmm.
and it was like he pretty much shot like the ball so much, and I don't think the NBA players have the stamina to go that long to play and shoot as much. The game was very different, so it's probably a little easier, but still, I just don't think it's a record that will ever get broken again because it's just you can't miss, I think, if you want to break that record in the NBA. So that's the one record that just pops into my mind right now that I don't think will ever get broken. It'd be awesome if it did, but who knows who can do it.
For sure. Yeah, no, that's a crazy one. And it's one of those things that I feel like it's the running joke right now of did it actually happen? Because,
Yeah.
people are I saw like a really old clip of Babe Ruth
Hmm.
hitting or taking BP in a before a game recently, and people are commenting like, "Oh, we have footage of this, but we don't have footage of that Wilt Chamberlain 100-point game."
Yeah.
So yeah, it's but obviously I don't want to take away from that either, but
Hmm.
yeah, that's a really good one.
Yeah.
I another one that came to mind was I don't know, just where Barry Bonds has
Hmm.
his home run record at 756. The in-season one, I think players could get pretty close, believe it or not.
Yeah.
Aaron Judge came, I think he had what, 63 a
Yeah,
couple years ago.
he was pretty close to it,
Hmm.
and now with these torpedo bats, who knows, they're
Good
on
point.
pace to break it. So yeah, that's a good one too that I think people might get close, but still just not close enough.
Right. And it kind of turns into like longevity of a career also. It's the
Hmm.
players nowadays are making more than they ever have. Do they have that want to play as long as LeBron
Hmm.
has? Obviously money hasn't been a factor to him because he's a billionaire, but I feel like it's kind of a different breed,
Yeah.
up and coming with a lot of these players. So the longevity of those records, Aaron Judge career wise, 756, I don't think it's going to happen, obviously.
Hmm.
His kind of coming into the game happened a little bit late. I think he's already like 33, if I'm not
Yeah.
mistaken. So, but yeah, you never know. If somebody kind of hops into, you know, I guess the big leagues at an earlier age, maybe it'll work out. We'll see.
Yeah, hey, we'll see because I just pulled up current active players, home run records. Giancarlo Stanton's at first with 429, and then Mike Trout 381. So if you look at all their
Mm,
ages, Stanton 35, Trout 33, Goldschmidt 37, Freeman 35. They're
yeah.
all they have to be playing into like their 40s to maybe get close. The youngest person on this list, let me see, 31, Matt Olson, but he's at 260.
Yeah.
You
Nah.
know,
It's got to triple that.
Shohei's 30 at 228. Like I say, you know,
Yeah.
it's pretty far out for anybody to to do that. Just overall. Um, So,
Crazy.
so it shows that nobody's been able to hit it the way Barry Bonds had, and like you mentioned, yes, even right now with what we're talking about are gonna say steroids. That's the only reason he did it.
Hmm.
No, I've seen. I don't know if you've seen it on TikTok or just any type of social media. There's like these people trying out their torpedo bats and they're just hitting bombs and they're just saying it's because normally where it gets what's the word where it gets the area
Hit it
where it's
inside
more, yeah, like they usually get like knocked, not knocked up,
the barrel on the
but
ball.
yeah, where they're missing it, but now that they moved the width of it more in that place, they're hitting more bombs. It's like, it's a talent thing with what Barry Bonds did because all the bats were the same. It wasn't a
Yep.
tailored bat to look at where he hit the ball the most because if he would have done that, he would have surpassed some of the records he has already.
For sure. Yeah, no, and I think it's jammed on the
Jammed,
ball.
yeah. Yeah.
Yeah. And yeah, moving the barrel down,
Hmm.
lessens that likelihood. I think Barry famously swung a shorter bat to try to
Hmm.
get more inside on the ball, get the
Yeah.
barrel on it, and obviously worked wonders for him.
Hmm.
But other players, they dug in and kind of had like a deeper cup, which is that top portion of the bat where
Okay.
it divots in.
Hmm.
They thought that might have provided a little bit of an
Yeah.
advantage, so that way it kind of hollows out and I guess makes the sweet spot a little bit
Yeah.
lower. But it's again, torpedo bats I think are great. I want to see more home runs
Hmm.
personally. I thought,
Yeah.
I saw a clip today of like a post-game interview of Mark McGwire. The dude was just Muscle Beach status. It's just like,
Yeah.
holy shit. You know,
He was.
it's crazy. And that, in my opinion, that was the greatest era
Hmm.
of my lifetime
Yeah.
in sport, in baseball history. So, yeah. And then with those names that you mentioned, just going back to that, the top two names, Stanton and Trout, can't even stay healthy for an entire season. So
No.
there's no way.
Yeah.
Um, they're both kind of what could have been. I think Trout a little bit more.
Hmm.
Stanton's just pure power, but Trout, did a little bit more than that, especially with the stolen bases early on. But
Yeah.
dude's body's kind of breaking down. He's had a great start to his year though, and he had a
Hmm.
really good robbing of a home run tonight um,
Yeah.
against
Oh, yeah.
Seattle. So that was pretty sweet
Nice.
to
Yeah.
watch. But we'll see. He also plays for a poverty franchise with the Angels. So that's rough also.
Yeah. Yeah. So we'll see. But yeah, that's that's the records I see. Gretzky better than Ovi. Like I say, kudos to Ovi because like we talked about, hard to do the goal record
Yeah.
passing Gretzky, who is, like I say, I think still the greatest hockey player of all time. I haven't seen anybody to match that. And like you mentioned, assists, he doubled Ovi in assists, points, same thing, almost 1,000, a little over 1,000 more points than him. And then also just awards, championships. Ovi only has one Stanley Cup, where Gretzky has four. All the Hart,
Yeah.
Ross, Mice trophies. Gretzky has a lot of them, where Ovi barely has one in some. So I think
Yep.
overall, Wayne Gretzky is still one of the greatest, but nothing against Alexander Ovechkin because I do think it's one of the hardest things to do, and we'll see if anybody gets close within the next few years. It's going to take a while, but if anybody gets close,
It'll take a while. Yeah, somebody
yeah,
who starts young, stays consistent, and
yeah,
I don't know. Maybe hockey will be easier. They tend to play through injuries. They
yeah.
could have a partially decapitated, cut off arm or something and
Yeah,
still play. So it's crazy. Different breed, and records are meant to be broken. Let's see if it happens. Another,
yeah,
it's in the news. It's talk.
yeah.
I like it.
It is. It's good. All right. So my next take, and I just read it. I was about to send you this take
Oh
as
no
well.
way.
Yeah, but I did it. I
It's
have
good.
something else for you next.
Okay.
So
Sweet.
scientists have just brought back the dire wolf from a 13,000 year extinction. I'll give it 20 years, and we got ourselves Jurassic Park. I was thinking the same thing when I thought about it. First off, bringing back the direwolf, I I think it's really cool because it is an extinct animal.
Mhm.
We've talked about technology, somewhat technology, more the AI stuff, but this is still something so advanced that I don't think we ever imagined could have happened. That it's cool to see, and you know, seeing the dire wolves in movies, hearing about the history of how big they were and they were pets. I think Game of Thrones really
Mhm.
up the
Yep.
dire wolves. Everybody wants one now because of the show. It's so cool to see, but it's also the question for me is what next? And it is one of the things I thought, like, okay, if you could bring back dire wolves, that extinct animal, what's gonna be next? Next is Jurassic Park, exactly what that they were doing in the movies, because there's fossils of dinosaurs that most likely you could find a way to genetically make a dinosaur again. And would it be a park would want to go to? Hell yeah, I'm gonna go.
There you
But
go.
I gotta watch a lot of Jurassic Park to sort of prep myself of what to do when this goes bad, because
Oh yeah.
it's hard to know with those type of animals that are so big, and a lot of them carnivores, on how to control them. Like I said, there's all these movies show, oh, you could do XYZ to control the dinosaur, but then something goes wrong. And I think even though they're made up movies from stories, I've always thought movies have some reality to them. So it's gonna be interesting, but cool that the direwolves come back. I think before I ever decide if I want one, I sort of want to see how they continue breeding them and how they come out, how tame you
Yeah.
could have them. But I think if you're walking around the street with a direwolf, ain't no dog, ain't no person gonna mess with you.
No. Oh my God. Absolute beast.
Yeah.
Just something huge. Yeah, no, nobody's gonna F around with you. Yeah, no, my mind with this whole situation immediately goes to Jurassic Park, as you said yours did too. It's watching Jurassic Park, kind of going back to that and just like you said, if something like that comes back, I for sure want to rewatch those movies because then it'll give me like subtle hints of what to do in case
Yeah.
a T-Rex wants to like
Uh,
go ape shit and go crazy around the park. Which dinosaurs do you not make a lot of noise with? Which
yeah.
ones have better eyesight?
Hmm.
Those are things that all come to mind, and then not have that ringtone of
Yeah.
or whatever.
Yeah.
And all of that comes to mind. But yeah, I too would want to visit. I would be all for it. I think that would be super badass. And yeah, just where medical, science is getting
Yeah.
is extraordinary. And certainly want to give props to Colossal Biosciences, a
Hmm.
Dallas-based biotech company, for making this happen. I think that's super cool. And I definitely would be interested to see, what they have next.
Hmm.
You mentioned it, and are we going to go woolly mammoths? Are we
Hmm.
going to bring those bad boys back?
Yeah.
Saber-toothed tigers. It's
Hmm.
you name it, megalodon. I don't
Yeah.
know. Why not? It's
That was a little scary. I don't know if I'd want to
that
go in
would
the
be a little
ocean again.
sketch. That would be, yeah,
Yeah,
no, because you
even on
never
a
know where
cruise
the hell
ship,
it's going
even
to
on a cruise ship, I don't think I'd feel comfortable going. Why Vera cancel those Disney cruises? There's a megalodon out in the ocean now.
Right. Yeah, straight up. Yeah, planes only across water.
Yeah.
Yeah, no, but no, it's fascinating. It's stuff that
Hmm.
obviously was once seemed like fiction,
Hmm.
and it's coming back to life, which is
Yeah.
insane.
Hmm.
We AI and all of that
Yeah.
interluding, and here we are with um I don't know, let's bring back anything, quite
Yeah.
frankly. Maybe it'll unlock, you know, hidden messages, secrets that we didn't know
Hmm.
about our past as well, and give us more info to, I guess, make this a bigger ordeal. So
Yeah.
pretty cool stuff. Surprised it's already happening, but we all
Hmm.
know how quick tech advances. Um, that's why I like your take, John, of
Yeah.
20 years. Let's see Jurassic Park. You
Yeah.
know?
No, it's crazy. And like you mentioned, kudos to that company for doing this. What doors it opens, it's a mystery. And like I say, are they going to use it for good? Are they going to use it for bad? The newer Jurassic World, the ones they were using the raptors to, they were training them to sort of be hunters, for war, So what are
Mhm.
these companies going to use it for? And you mentioned, how technology's improving and sort of a little off subject. I was at the doctor's this week and it was interesting because I was talking to the doctor, not going to put him out because what we talked about might be a little against what doctors want, but he was talking about how AI is eventually going to take over the medical profession. And we talked about it with Armando, how,
Mhm.
vasectomies, they're going to start being done by AI robots, but he was talking about like, you're going to come to the doctors, you're going to sit in front of AI and tell them everything that's going on with you. And then they're going to, because they have so much access to so much data, they're going to know exactly what you need, what procedures to do, and all the doctors, you know, real human doctors need to do is just confirm that yes, you're right. This is what we're going to do, and go through that process. So like when he mentioned, I was like, man, that's crazy that you're already talking about it. Your own profession, but you're seeing how technology is helpful and like what we talked about with Armando, AI is something probably to invest in because it is where the future is going. And even though I still am a little scared of it, I do support it a lot because if it's gonna help us get answers a lot quicker, it might be good for some instances.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah. No, I too was at the doctor this past week and had an x-ray done and I was kind of thinking like how could AI make this happen? It's go
Hmm.
there, lay on the table, let it self-adjust and just do a full body scan real quick or something.
Yeah.
It's it's fascinating. If you have doctors talking about it, you just know that's yeah, straight up exactly where it's gonna go. They
Yeah.
know, and if it's kind of something along the lines of like a medical assistant role, and then maybe in other occasions,
Yeah.
you mentioned it, if you get snipped or something like that,
Yeah.
you know, hey doc, easy down there. But
Yeah.
it's it would be crazy, if in the future we have
Mhm.
robots, as medical professionals.
Yeah.
So
Yeah.
yeah,
Well, but we'll see.
we'll see. Good stuff on science.
Yeah.
Next one here, John sent it over. This summer blockbuster lineup is off to a good start with Minecraft with nearly $160 million opening weekend. This summer will be one to remember with still needing the releases of Superman, Fantastic Four, Mission Impossible, Jurassic World, Rebirth, to 28 years later, to name a few. Yeah, no, it's big news over the weekend was certainly Minecraft and the amount of people that turned out to the
Mhm.
theaters. I was actually trying to look for tickets to like a 7 p.m. showing on Friday to take Theo real quick, and
Yeah.
front row was only open. And I'm like,
Oh.
we'll wait for during the week and just go
Yeah.
see like, something in the evening. But yeah, no, it was a packed house, at
Mhm.
pretty much every theater up here. And, Jack Black certainly making his rounds on media, and,
Yes.
saw a lot of him this past week, and really good remarks about the movie. I think that a lot
Hmm.
of people enjoyed it. We talked about it here, video games becoming movies, or
Yeah.
TV shows, and Minecraft was a great idea.
Hmm.
It's a good one. It's something that was, I think we talked rankings here of video games. I think that was like number two most sold all
Yeah.
time, if I'm not
Hmm.
mistaken. I think Tetris
Yeah.
with it being number one. So, you know, perfect genre to do that. Kids
Hmm.
obviously getting involved in it. And like you said, we have a whole slew of great movies that are upcoming. Really excited for that. I know Mission Impossible is a really big advertisement during the
Yeah.
Super Bowl, so that'll be an interesting one. I really enjoy those movies, especially knowing that Tom Cruise does all of his stunts, which is
Stunts.
insane.
Hmm.
Props to him still going at it. And,
Hmm.
it feels like each movie only gets better, in my opinion,
Hmm.
which is crazy. And then, yeah, Jurassic World. I mean, we're right back at it again. Literally last
Hmm.
topic talked about it, and here we are with you in more Jurassic
Yeah.
Park. Always stoked for those. But yeah, really excited for these. And
Hmm.
I like the feeling of a lot of these movies. I think all of these will be theater releases, right? These aren't
Hmm.
going to be like on streaming. I
Yeah.
really like that actually. I understand why, people like Adam Sandler, obviously he has Happy Gilmore 2 coming out, and I think that's going to go straight to Netflix.
Hmm.
But I really enjoy just the movie theater aspect. I know you're a huge movie
Yeah.
theater goer. I think that's really cool, kind of keeping that there because there's a
Hmm.
lot of worries, especially during COVID time, of movie theaters going bye-bye. So
Hmm.
I think it's great to see a rejuvenation of just people going back to the movies. So
Yeah.
cool stuff. I appreciate it. Is there anything like as far as these movies that
Hmm.
we listed here in this topic, what are you most looking forward to, John?
the few that I'm looking most forward to, Jurassic World, Rebirth. Always l
Mhm.
loved the Jurassic Park franchise. They've been some hits, some misses, but still very good to watch.
Mhm.
And I'm hearing this one could be more like towards that rated R version. So I'm excited
Oh
about that
yeah.
if it is, because who
Yeah. We're
knows what
big on
they
that.
do when it's rated
Oh,
R. Um,
T-Rex.
T-Rex, like I say, could be gory, which I think would be awesome to sort of see that.
Yeah.
Um, the next one, Mission Impossible, is another one. 28 years later, I really
Mhm.
enjoyed that zombie franchise. 28 days later, 28 weeks later, very great movie. So, finally making what 28 years later looks like. Then How to Train Your Dragon, like I think I mentioned it. Big fan of the cartoon with Vera. We always watched them in the theater, so excited about the live action, and um, we saw a lot of it at Epic Universe, Universal
Oh
opening.
yeah.
So that, and then Fantastic Four, I think, is the next big one that I'm really also excited about. Just Marvel. Never could go wrong with Marvel. So a lot of movies I've already with Vera, we've talked about, okay, which ones are we going to, and we're already recruiting family to babysit. Like, all right, who could babysit this day? Who could babysit this day so we could go? Because
Oh yeah.
it's a little harder to watch Jurassic World with a 2-year-old. I don't think he'd
Oh
stay
yeah.
still the whole time or
Yeah.
like it at all. Yeah.
Yeah. No, it's definitely not what is it, Land Before Time?
Yeah, it's
Where
not
it's
that.
like just very child friendly. Yeah, no, Land Before
Yeah.
Time and get your head ripped off.
Yeah.
You know.
Uh,
Yeah, but that brings me back to like the early Jurassic Park days. I feel
mhm.
like those were, a bit more gory, less family
Yeah.
friendly in a way.
Hmm.
I feel like that's what makes those a lot more fun
Yeah.
is in out of all the dinosaurs, obviously T-Rexes freak me the hell out, but like Velociraptors, man.
Those
Something
things
about
are
those dudes, like, oh
they're
yeah,
just smart.
yeah,
You know.
exactly.
They
It's like every you can't move, it's
yeah.
they're good with eyesight, right? Or is it hearing for those ones?
Hearing and
You know?
eyesight. Yeah.
Oh, it's both. Yeah. Yeah.
Yeah.
See, you just can't mess around. They're fast as
Yeah.
hell.
Yeah, they're
Oh,
fast as hell.
oh,
Cause like we mentioned with the direwolves, like, we look at the movies and figure out what not to do. Like, if you're at a theme park, the one place you can't go to is the restroom. We saw it in the first Jurassic Park. The guy that hid in the bathroom
yeah.
got ate by the T-Rex. And,
Yeah.
the restrooms most of the time only have one exit. If you're in front of a Velociraptor, these guys are gonna
Yeah.
know you're, in one of the stalls trying to hide. So, not the
Hell yeah.
best option. So it's gonna be a lot of research we got to do before, the real Jurassic World's open and we go
Yep.
explore before some carnage happens, probably.
Absolutely. Yeah. We saw it in Halloween also with Mike Myers.
Hmm.
That dude in the stall was trying to fight back, and
Yeah.
it's a vulnerable position. You don't want
Yeah.
that. It's
Uh,
bad news bears. And like you said, one exit. And then with 28 years later, Theo, with zombies, he asked me a
uh,
funny question this week,
uh.
and he was like, "Hey Dad, when did zombies exist?" And I'm like, oh, well, they haven't existed. It's something called fiction. Just, him kind of thinking about zombies because I think
Mhm.
he's seen a cartoon of it. And,
Oh yeah.
it's funny that, it's sparked his interest because zombies, we could always use a good zombie movie. I
Hmm.
feel like that those are always really fun, interesting, and obviously keep you at the edge of your seat. So,
Yeah.
good stuff. Love this with movies.
Hmm.
There's been some bummer times with movies. I feel like over the past, maybe a couple of years, I feel like
Hmm.
there's stagnant periods, and just this lineup for summer is incredible. So stoked on that.
Yeah.
Good topic.
Yeah. Yeah. So movies, let us know what you guys are excited for. Like I said, there's so many coming out. We could be here for hours trying to talk about every single movie coming out. So,
Oh yeah.
um, but yeah, let us know. But yeah, those are our banter takes for today. Like I say, very similar. Like I said, I had a lot of the direwolf stuff. It's just great minds that think alike, Tim.
That's right. That's right. That's why we do this show, John.
Yes. So yeah, but we'll move on to next topic for us is March Madness, and it's officially over. It's like I mentioned, Monday, April 7th. We
Oh
just
yeah.
had the championship game, and congrats to Florida for winning it. I think for both of us, we mentioned it last week, that was our dark horse team to win it.
Yep.
Um, Duke. Let's talk about Duke first because they lost to Houston. Like I say, kudos to Houston because that was a very tough Duke team to beat. And they pulled it off by the edge of their seats. I think it was a 2 3 point
Yep.
game. That Duke team was just so dominant. I think a lot of people had money on Duke winning it all. So what were your thoughts about that Duke Houston game, Tim?
Yeah, it's crazy that, Houston, I mean, really pulled through and made it as far as they did. I think a big part of it from what, I kind of saw and a lot of people are talking about was conditioning.
Mm-hmm.
And looking into the background of what Houston did, I think all of their players, no matter the height,
Mm-hmm.
size, were all sub 6 minute mile
Yes.
runners, which is incredible. And that's a
Yeah.
really good thing to think about. You're
Mm-hmm.
running several miles a game and in hustle beats almost
Mm-hmm.
everything, when it comes to
Yeah.
basketball. So I think that's an underrated stat, underrated thing to kind of look for as far as training goes for a
Mm-hmm.
lot of these players. So I think that could have been the difference, quite
Yeah.
honestly. And, Houston was kind of a team that, was obviously great throughout the season. But in the tourney, they had a lot of close games, I felt like,
Hmm.
and they just pulled through, and every single one of them closed out when they needed to. And, certainly there was, I think, some, back and forth about, some of the foul calls in the late in
Hmm.
the game with Duke. Um, but, conditioning came down to a lot of it.
Yeah.
And, uh, Cooper Flag can only do so much. I think
Yeah.
he put up 26, 27 that game.
Hmm.
Besides that, it was kind of, I think uh, Knipple put
Yeah.
up,
Okay.
I think, second
Hmm.
highest score on the team for that game.
Yeah.
So, it's tough to rely on one person to do it all. And a lot of people are actually kind of going after Cooper Flag, saying that he can't pull through in big games, but honestly, it's not going to matter with his draft stock. I
No.
think that he's a sure shot number one pick still,
Yeah.
and deservedly so. He had a really crazy and one on
Yeah.
that, reverse layup. That was sick.
Yeah.
He's a freak. He has height. It's everything an NBA team would want to look for. So, props whoever,
Hmm.
wins the lottery this year with him. But disappointing. I had Duke winning everything. Didn't pull through for me. Did okay throughout the tourney because I won with favorites pretty much the whole way.
Yeah.
Um, but yeah, I thought overall, it was a good game, hard
Hmm.
fought game, and that's exactly what we want to see. What do you think, John?
Yeah, I like the game. It was hard fought. It was close. I did think Duke was gonna pull out, but like you mentioned, Houston came back and was it that conditioning? I think Houston has a more, complete team dynamic, which probably helped as well, where it wasn't, a star player having to pull it out. But like you mentioned, people may be talking about Cooper Flag not being able to close out the big games, but if you look at all the past Duke teams that have gone to the tourney, they haven't won it and they have superstars. I'm not going to mention Zion Williamson because I don't. He's just a
Not a
bust.
fan.
But Jason, oh, fan of him, but he's just not living up to that expectation. I think
Yeah,
for
you're
me.
right.
But like I said, his game. I always liked this game. He's just a hard, But he just got too chubby, and who knows what else was happening in New Orleans. But like Jason Tatum, was at Duke, didn't win it. There's so many names you could look that was at Duke and didn't win the big game, but they're stars in the NBA. You can't really say Cooper Flag can't close out the big games because it's different. So I'm excited to see where what Cooper Flag does. I'm curious who is going to tank these next few games, to end out the season to just get a few more draft balls for the lottery.
Yeah.
But we'll see. I'm excited about that. But overall, good game. The fouls, I could see some of the controversies, the calls, but straight up, that's just a game. It happens every single game. You can't complain about it because sometimes they go in Duke's favor. It just didn't work out. So kudos to Houston, great team. They have one of the best defensive teams, in the tournament. So I think that's what helped them to get to the championship game today.
Yeah, for sure. Yeah, no, and
Hmm.
Houston, tremendous. LJ Cryer was had a great game
Hmm.
against he had another good game against Florida here, but
Hmm.
against Duke in particular, 26 points.
Hmm.
He played 40 minutes of that game, every single minute of that game. So, props to that team, hard fought. It was tremendous. Um, and yeah, moving into, I guess, championship game, which was tonight, April
Hmm.
7th, Monday. Florida had to kind of come from behind there at the end,
Hmm.
won by 2 points. Tremendous season, tremendous victory. I think
Yeah.
Florida basketball is back. We talked
Hmm.
about this last week, John. Is it more of a football school? Is it more of a
Yeah.
basketball school? You want basketball school, and I completely agree. It's
Yeah.
just where we're at. The Florida's going to have to do a ton of recruiting on their football end to kind of make it back. They're going to have to find another Tim Tebow at this point because
Hmm.
Florida basketball is was tremendous this season. Walter Clayton,
Hmm.
I think, had a little bit more of a rougher game. There was some situation I saw like a replay of a jump shot he had, obviously got hit in the arm. Missed it. Still put up 11 points, seven
Yeah.
assists. But he had a great game before that as well, and he had a tremendous tournament and season altogether. He's going to be a big name heading into the NBA as well.
Hmm.
That's it's exactly what you look for out of this tournament is this
Yeah.
players that maybe you didn't hear too much about throughout the season, but you hear all about them, in the tournament. But yeah, LJ Cryer, he's another one. Led his team again today. No other Houston Cougar was in double digits for this game, and LJ Cryer had 19.
Hmm.
And 4 of 11 from three. Tough game.
Yeah.
And one other thing, security lighten up a little bit. You have Hakeem Olajuwon trying to get on the floor to celebrate with
He's,
Houston
yeah.
after their victory over Duke. Let him on. It's
Yeah.
fucking
He's a
Hakeem.
legend. He's
Yeah,
a
dude.
legend.
He's a legend of Houston.
Yeah.
Let him in. Holy shit. But altogether, I don't think that this is a reason for Houston to hang their heads because hell of a season, hell of a tournament. Houston basketball, man, just history speaks for
Mhm.
itself. They're just always involved,
Yeah.
always a hell of a team, and that's what I love about this tournament. Though it
Hmm.
just brings these colleges out that you don't think much of, in other sports. So
Hmm.
it's great. Yeah, what your thoughts on
Yeah.
this championship game?
It was a good game, hard fought game. It looked like Houston was gonna take it away. Like you mentioned, Walter Clayton Jr., not his best game, but I think did well with his assisting. And like I mentioned, Houston's defense, one of the better defenses in this whole tournament. So they knew to have a chance to not be blown out or lose it, they had to control Walter Clayton. And I think they did a good job till the end where I don't think it was like till like the last 6 minutes, he barely had like two, three, like 2 points. He wasn't scoring at all during the game. He was dishing it and just that distraction. So Will Richard for Florida, 18 points. Alex Condon, 12 points. Um, they were getting it done. So overall, great game. And like you mentioned, Houston, they've been playing a lot of close games. They play hard, they play fast. Um, but maybe and they're conditioned, but maybe it was just too much the whole tournament that their conditioning finally wore out because they did look tired towards the end of the game. Where if you look at the bench, Houston bench was just sitting while Florida was up trying to get the crowd into the game, and it might have been the difference maker. How fatigued they were.
Definitely. Yeah, no, and we talk about close games. Opening round of 64, that was a blowout, 178-40. But
Hmm.
after that, they had Gonzaga beat by 5, Purdue beat by 2, Tennessee they controlled, beat them by 19, but back
Hmm.
to Duke, beat them by 3.
Hmm.
Championship game, lost
Hmm.
by 2.
Yeah.
So yeah, just all turning long,
Hmm.
super close games. But see that clutch moments, that extra little bit of hustle, makes all the
Hmm.
difference in the world.
Yeah.
And that's exactly what this Houston team had. And
Hmm.
maybe this is something that teams kind of look for in the future. Basketball
Hmm.
is one of those sports where, just conditioning
Yeah.
and running is just it's there's no
Hmm.
real pauses. There's obviously some pauses, but like just
Yeah.
the amount of hustle. Soccer, very
Hmm.
similar. But I takes me back to high school baseball. My my coach made us run what we called squares, and he had to run it like more than a track lap
Oh
in
man.
less than I think a minute and 45. And if you didn't do it, you had to do it again. And then my whole time thinking, man, like I'm like, why are we running this much? It's baseball. Like
This
you're
place.
sitting around, you're
Yeah.
looking at freaking the trees whistling in the wind.
Yeah.
If you're playing in the outfield, like why are we doing this much? Basketball is one of those sports where it just makes sense. So
Hmm.
tremendous, great tourney.
Yeah.
We talked about it a bit. A lot of big names in this tournament. It's fun. Uh, in its March brings madness. I
Yes,
liked it.
it
We
does.
needed it. It was like a
Yeah, we
cleanse after football.
we needed it, and like we mentioned, I think it was a good tournament. I think we called it beforehand. It was going to be one of the best March Madnesses. I think at the
Yep.
beginning, a lot of people would probably counter us saying it wasn't because there weren't many upsets, but I think the quality of games, how close they were towards the end, made a big difference and made this tournament one that you'll never forget, because even the last play today, Houston, Walter Clayton just jumping, making, the Houston player just can't, he tried to cancel or pass, the his shot and just dropped it and he couldn't touch it, and they didn't take a final shot, which sucks, because who knows what could have happened. But that's part of the madness of March Madness and the game of college basketball. So I enjoyed this year's tournament. I think we'll talk a little bit more about it. NIL has changed the landscape a bit, and I think we can't really be hoping for as many Cinderellas, but still, there's always going to be those few. So overall, great March Madness. Sad it's over because it's a fun month. Uh, but because it's over, it means there's a lot of other stuff on the horizon. And one with the NBA draft outlook, we talked about Cooper Flag, consensus, I think number one pick across the nation. I don't think there's anybody else not taking Cooper Flag as number one, but anybody, that sort of stands out from this tournament, Tim, that, just draft outlook.
Yeah, I certainly, we talked about him a whole lot right now. LJ Cryer, I
Yeah.
think before he was kind of listed as like a second round,
Hmm.
pick. He's a senior, so obviously he's kind of played out, through a lot of his years. He's not kind of like a Cooper Flag where he's one and done.
Yeah.
So, there's not a whole lot of talk about him until
Hmm.
lately. And I think that he just boosted his draft stock a ton. I could see him
Hmm.
slipping into maybe a late first round, really
Hmm.
early second round. Um, he's going to be a name out there. You look at players like we mentioned it last week. Two of the top
Yeah.
three picks are at with Rutgers,
Yeah.
and they weren't even in this freaking tourney, which
Hmm.
is crazy with Dylan Harper and Ace Bailey. Um, VJ Edgecombe,
Hmm.
Edgecombe,
Yeah.
um, out of Baylor, he's a big name.
Hmm.
You know, uh, Jeremiah Fears
Hmm.
with Oklahoma, heard
He
a
was
lot
good.
about him.
Hmm.
Very good. Jace Richardson, I talked about him. He's a big
Yeah.
name. His father, one of my favorite players of all time,
Yeah.
Jason Richardson.
Jason Richardson.
He can ball. I think that's a big name as well. He's projected at top 10,
Hmm.
9 to Portland as it stands. Um, and yeah, Maryland, Derek
Hmm.
Queen, center. He's another one that's maybe going to
Hmm.
skim the top 10 as well. So,
Yeah.
and then another one too, Con Knipple. You
Hmm.
know, fun name.
Yeah.
It's a,
Knipple.
it's a good one. Yeah. But we saw a lot of him throughout this tournament. He's kind of right hand man with
Hmm.
Cooper for that team, and
Yeah.
he put up numbers and put up good points, and he might get top 10 right now. He's projected around
Hmm.
11 according to this mock draft, with the Miami Heat, but or sorry, 12 with Chicago
Yeah.
Bulls, but. I don't know. Again, I didn't hear a whole lot about these players. I'm not going to lie, heading
Yeah.
into this tournament, but it just these
Yeah.
names sprout themselves in this tourney, and that's what makes this tournament so much fun, also. But was there
Yeah.
anybody that kind of sticks out to you, John?
Yeah. I are you looking at the one on Bleacher Report?
I sure am.
Yeah, that's the one I have right now too. Igor Demon, the guard slash forward from BYU, he played well during the
Oh yeah.
tournament. I think he could get a nice little boost. Um, and then we talked about him, Walter Clayton Jr. He did so much for Florida. I'm surprised he's only at 26, but I did hear it's because of his age. He is an older senior or player. So they're looking at age because yeah, they're you want to look for those younger players. But I think whoever could steal Walter Clayton in the draft it is gonna have a great solid player for the future. And then Danny Wolf, the forward from Michigan State, really great. Liked watching him play.
Yep.
Um, but yeah, there's a lot of names. Um, the one player I saw before the tournament a little bit because there were a lot of games. Stojakovic's son, he is a baller,
Yeah.
man. I
Dude, he's
saw
so
him.
good.
He's good. Like with this NIL money, that kid, I think if he's loyal, he could take, the Bears far.
Yep.
But if not, there's going to be a team, Houston, Florida, Duke, that they need players, and he might be in that transfer portal. Um, but I saw him play. I was surprised, I'll say, at first, and I'm excited to see what he brings, to the NBA. And then the Boozer twins. I'm excited
Oh
about them
yeah.
at Duke. There were rumors, people saying like Cooper Flag should go back for one more year because Flag and the Boozer
Imagine.
twins, man, that would be if they don't win it, then yeah, maybe you gotta knock Cooper Flag a little bit for the draft, but still, like that's
Yeah.
that's gonna be insane.
Yeah. No, and that NIL money is sick,
Yeah.
but we'll see. Some changes up ahead. We'll talk about
Hmm.
it. But yeah, it could be worth it. He's
Yeah.
got a shoe brand in college with Cooper Flag. But yeah, those Boozer twins, man, they're badass. One of them, don't know which one, sorry.
Hmm.
But just one uh um player of the year, right, for high
Hmm.
school.
Yeah.
So tremendous, tremendous, tremendous players.
Yeah.
We'll see if they go with their dad's hairline that he does. Very famous hairline.
Yes.
Rumors have it it's painted. But yeah, but
Yeah.
yeah, no, it's good stuff there with the Boozer twins, and it keeps it exciting. I like all these big names coming out, having fun. In going back to Stojakovic, he's already transferred from Stanford to Cal.
Hmm.
I could definitely see a move. Again,
Yeah.
if it NIL money talks, man.
Hmm.
It's like you mentioned, Florida's going to be a team looking for players. Obviously,
Hmm.
Duke, if he wants to go team up with them,
Yeah.
maybe over there. So,
Hmm.
loyalty kind of changes, money talks, and
Hmm.
it's literally minor minor league
Yeah. It's
basketball.
it's minor league basketball. Yeah. And I think before we go to the next topic, sort of related to this, one question for you that just popped up. We're seeing a lot of, ex basketball players, kiddos, offspring becoming big names in college. This generate, this 90s to 2000s generation. But like the older generation, like the Jordan kids, none of them really were that good. You know, what do you think might have changed, with how these pro players have built their kids to be great basketball players? Because you got to throw Bronny James into the mix because he's in the NBA. You can't say anything about it. He's in the NBA. There might be some strings that were pulled for that, but still, he's a baller. His son, I think will be a lot better player. But these current players, ex players, their kids that are going into college, they're all stars. They're all ballers compared to, back in the 80s, the Jordan era, where none of their kids were really that big of stars other than Steph Curry, I think, you know.
Right. No, that's a great point. Yeah, you look at Jordan's kids and not much came of it.
Hmm.
I think that they didn't even really play D1 basketball,
No.
which is extraordinary. Yeah, I just think maybe just the science around the game, how much has
Hmm.
developed. I think that and then also just the inclusivity of
Hmm.
a lot of these players, children being allowed like in locker rooms, for
Hmm.
example. You see it with Jason Tatum's son all the time.
Yeah.
He's constantly in the locker room. Players don't mind it, obviously, and it's
Hmm.
fun. And I can only imagine the experience that they get. Chris Paul's son, I
Hmm.
saw some highlights of him this past weekend. He's
Okay.
growing fast, man. I
Is he?
remember his like early locker room days back when he was on the
I
Clippers,
haven't
and
seen
just
videos of him.
yeah, no, he's balling. That's another name, and
Hmm.
it's just the inclusivity game. They're around it a lot more. I think that a lot of these players, the longevity, the contracts are really good, so they're playing a bit longer. So
Hmm.
the development of their children. they're getting a little bit older by the time that they finally retire. It's kind of
Yeah.
surprising to see like, oh wow, so and so retired, but his son is already playing. Carmelo Anthony's another one.
Hmm.
His son is up and coming. You know, it's I just yeah, I think it's that, and then paired with, just the science around the game. I think that there's a lot more drills that are kind of made up, and I think they're trained like professionals too.
Hmm.
They're
Yeah.
just, you know, they can afford the trainers. They probably train with their dads, as they practice as well. I'm sure that Bronny, for
Hmm.
example, like you brought up, he was around it, I'm sure, all the
Hmm.
time. LeBron spent over $1 million on his own body throughout the season
Yeah.
for damn sure. Bronny and his other son, Bryce, are certainly well equipped with
Hmm.
everything they need to become superstars as well.
Yeah.
Um, so yeah, I think that makes a big difference with it, compared to previous generations. And I don't know, maybe there's just more of a passion of these players that kind
Hmm.
of want to see it happen. As far as I know, I'm not going to call out Michael Jordan for not being close to his
No,
kids,
yeah.
but I just feel like, maybe the pressure, or, the maybe it's just different. Like I
Hmm.
said, they're just not around the game quite as much as a lot of these kids are now. Steph went up to his son during a timeout the other day,
Yeah.
and it's cool. I think it's
Yeah.
awesome. I love the involvement. And if you have those genes,
Hmm.
God, take advantage, man.
Oh yeah.
Like, yeah. I mean, if your parent is, Shaq, for example, I actually had pretty high hopes for his son. Unfortunately, obviously, he had the heart
Hmm.
issue, but his son, I think he's like 6'11" as well.
Yeah.
If you're gifted like that, take advantage, be involved
Hmm.
with it, make it a career of your own, and ball out. So I
Yeah.
think it's good though, because
Yeah.
it's like a rejuvenation of what we always watch, John. What do you
Hmm.
think? I
Yeah,
see the difference.
I think the same. I think it's just more of that exposure. I think, these stars really giving everything they can for their kiddos to do well and develop and learn, which, like I say, it's just technology, the way the game works, the science around basketball, shooting arcs compared to when Jordan was around. And like you mentioned, nothing against Jordan, how he did stuff. It was just a different time. We've seen them try, but not do too well. But they're successful in another way. So, I'm very interested. I pulled up. This is from 2024, so it's from 1075 The Fan. So sons of notable NBA players to watch in 2024. One, Carmelo's son, Kyan Anthony. I
Hmm.
think he was a little frustrated that he was snubbed from the McDonald's All-American game. Um,
Understandably.
next, Dennis Rodman's son, DJ Rodman. I didn't even know his son played. He's at
I knew about his
um,
daughter, who's a great
Yeah.
soccer player,
Yeah.
but
Trinity
yeah,
Rodman. Yeah. Son
yeah.
plays at USC, it looks like, from and like I said, this is
Oh
from a
wow.
year ago. Um, and then Paige's son, Andrej, is it?
Andre, I think it's just Andre.
Andre?
Yeah,
Just Andre? It's just the J silent, like Paige.
yeah, just like Stoy,
So, yeah.
Stoyakovich.
But him playing, and it shows him at Stanford, now at Cal, and we'll see where he
Yep.
goes. And then it shows Bronny, Brycey. I think Bryce James will be the better son. And then Gilbert
Yep.
Arenas' son, uh,
Oh yeah.
Elijah Arenas.
Oh
It
yeah.
seems like he's an up and comer. Juan Howard, remembering Juan Howard play his son Jace Howard.
Yep.
It's gonna be crazy. Jason Richardson, like you mentioned, Jace Richardson, gonna be
Yep.
a draft lot pick this year. Harper's kid, Dylan Harper, another
Yep.
one. Um, the Juan Wagner, haven't talked about that guy in a while, but DJ Wagner, his son.
Oh yeah.
So there's a lot of these players. Penny Hardaway, his son playing.
Hmm.
Andre Iguodala, his son, junior
Hmm.
playing. There's a lot of these players in the Boozer twins. Like I said, I could go on with this list for quite a while. It's crazy to see. It's awesome to see because, like I said, they're keeping that legacy alive. They're keeping that name. in the sport for many years to come. So very cool to see.
Definitely. Yeah, no, I completely agree. Growing up, I've brought I don't know if I brought this up to you, but I went to preschool with Tim Hardaway Jr.
Oh, oh, nice.
Tim Hardaway's kid, and I famously at preschool one day took the ball out of his hands and for whatever reason took the ball and kind of smacked it on top of his head and was kind of like, oh, it's my ball now, and was this kind of talking that ish on the court already. Maybe I'll take a small inkling. No, I'm just kidding. Of his career, that made him toughened him on the court. No, I'm just
Yeah.
playing. But no, and that was kind of a rarity, though. I bring up his name. Tim Hardaway Jr. is still in the league.
Mhm.
Had a great career. I believe he played at Michigan State or Michigan. I forget which one it
Mhm.
was. I think it was one of the two. But again, like his upbringing, he was around the game a lot
Yeah.
and, was involved.
Mhm.
But again, kind of a rarity during that era. That was
Yeah.
early mid 90s. So yeah, didn't happen a whole lot. And then now it's
It's
just
happening a lot
taken
more.
over. It's taken
Hmm.
over. So really cool stuff. I think it's great. I hope it continues to happen.
Hmm.
Hopefully, hopefully, Steph's son gets a good three ball going.
Yeah.
And we could see him out there. Likewise with any of his daughters, if they want to join the Golden State Valkyrie, I think that would be
Mhm.
great too. So,
Yeah.
shout out that WNBA team up and coming.
Yeah. Yeah, no, for sure. But yeah, that's March Madness. Like I said, the NBA draft outlook. I think I'm excited about it. Sort of watching a lot of March Madness this year. And seeing a lot of great players make a name for themselves, trying to build their draft lottery, which I think a lot of them did. So it'll be
Yep.
interesting to see. And like I mentioned, we'll see who's in the lottery too and who has the best chance at that number one. But man, can you think about it? San Antonio Spurs, Cooper Cup, Victor Wembanyama. Hopefully
Yep.
Wemby recovers well from the blood clot and can come back strong.
Absolutely.
That's a dangerous duo.
Oh, it is. Yeah. No, and then they just traded for what's his face from the Kings as well. It's
De'Aaron Fox. Yeah.
Darren Fox.
Yeah.
Yeah. Did you mention him? Sorry, I don't know if you did right
Nah.
there.
Yeah.
But and in CP3, the mentor,
Hmm.
bring him bring him on. It's
Yeah.
but yeah, that's a crazy team. It kind of seems like the top two teams at the moment is either the Jazz or the Wizards. We'll see. I think 76ers might be in the mix slightly.
Hmm.
Um, but yeah, it's one of those lotteries you certainly want to win.
Hmm.
But there's some really good consolations though
Yeah.
that are in this draft. This is such a better draft than last year. Last year was
Yeah.
such a disappointment. This year is incredible.
Yeah. That's why all those trading cards are just sitting at in the stores because
Yeah, nobody
nobody
wants
wants
it.
those players. Nothing against
Exactly.
those players. Some of them are balling out right now, but it's
Yeah,
just the names aren't the same as this upcoming draft or previous drafts.
absolutely. Shout out Quentin Post
Yeah.
taking on LeBron. He's not
Yes.
scared to back down from anybody.
Nope.
Yeah.
Nope. I don't think anybody's scared of LeBron nowadays, but
That's true that. True that. That's a
yeah.
good point. Valid. Especially Stephen A.
Yeah. But yeah,
But yeah, staying on the topic, John. Dive into NIL. We had some big
mhm.
news here. I'll give you the floor to kind of recap that though, and that article that we were kind of discussing pre-pod.
Yeah.
Big news all of a sudden.
Yeah, big news, seems like there's a settlement near finalization amid, some of the judges' last concerns. So this is something we saw from ESPN from Dan Murphy. So crediting him for getting this out to us, but it seems like the NCAA has agreed to pay about 2.8 billion in damages to past and current athletes to settle three federal antitrust lawsuits that claim the association's rules have limited the athlete's earning potential in various ways. So that's a big win, because NCAA college, they've made so much money out of all these kids, not just in basketball, but all sports. So
Yep.
paying some back, I don't think it's nearly enough what they made, but still, it's showing that there's a trend. Um, but what's also going to happen is Now, what the NCAA is going to be able to do is limit how much each school could spend on its athletes per year. So it's effectively a salary cap, and it's, from the sounds of it, it's going to start at about roughly 20.5 million per school. But it will increase annually during the first, the 10-year lifespan of this first deal. Um, so it it's pretty much making college sports the minor leagues for all these big sports because like I say they're setting up a salary cap, and I think we've talked about it. How can they fix, this NIL money? Like we're not saying for these kids not to get paid. I think some of these big names that everybody looks to should get paid because college is making so much money off of their name, likeness, autographs, all that stuff. Um, But now setting a limit, what is it going to do to the transfer portal? Because like we talked about, transfer portal was the big thing the last few years since NIL came into play because everybody's going into it because they know someone's going to pay them more than their current school to have them go there. So we'll see what it does. But what do you think, Tim? Is this good? Is it bad? Are you in the middle right now?
Yeah, I didn't really mind this past, like we'll use, basketball for an example. I didn't really mind this tourney, it with a lot of the big name schools kind of dominating it. I thought it was
Hmm.
okay. Could get old after a while. Obviously want to see a Cinderella team kind of make it a little bit further, but overall, it levels the playing field. And I think that we might see a lot of these players like that play for a big name school, whether it's Duke in basketball, USC in football, you name it. They I think will be, likely to not be, like, go after those big names in particular. Maybe they'll get a little bit more from a Northwestern, for example,
Hmm.
in football. And then, they, will have a little bit more of an opportunity to put it on a show with a big name team or big name, player. Um, I think that'll be a really interesting aspect. I look forward to it in football in
Hmm.
particular. Obviously we're kind of a big football program here, John, but
Hmm.
I think that's what makes it kind of more fun in a way is, kind of seeing a lot of these teams get a little bit more of I guess
Hmm.
a fighting chance compared to like an Alabama or a Georgia that we've seen in
Hmm.
the past.
Yeah.
And, kind of see these teams kind of get back at it. I think that this is the best step forward to equal it and kind of make it
Hmm.
similar to what it was before, but also having the benefit of paying these players what they deserve. So I think that this kind of does it. Obviously, it the plans are is that
Hmm.
this $20.5 million will go up annually over the next 10
Hmm.
years of this agreement, which is great. And then, like you mentioned, the $2.5 billion being paid back, to the players. NCAA just hoarding all that money for no damn reason.
Hmm.
It was necessary. So, I think that this is a great first step in trying to
Hmm.
combat a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
Transfer portal wise, we'll see.
Hmm.
I Again, it might be one of those things where, Penn State can pay you 5 mil,
Yeah.
but hey, Northwestern, I don't know why I keep bringing them up, but whatever. We'll give you 7.5 to come be
Hmm.
quarterback. You're still going to have bidding wars. It's still
Yeah.
going to happen. But then again, how much do you want around yourself? You can
Hmm.
make $7.5 million in college, but you feel like you're going to be a pro starter your rookie year, but then you have nobody to throw to. So if they're
Hmm.
not catching your balls, you're not going to look real great. So
Yeah.
it's one of those things that's a little bit iffy. We'll see how it works out, but overall, I think it's a step in the right
Hmm.
direction because there
Yeah.
does need to be some governance over this stuff. But what do you think, Joe?
Yeah, I think it's a step in the right direction just from the get-go. Reading a little bit more into this, it seems like there's a lot of people objecting this because they're saying it could eliminate thousands of roster spots in Division One's team across the country.
Hmm.
So one of the things that it notes here, and I'm curious how it's going to eliminate, is currently the NCAA's rules place limits on the number of scholarships that each team could give to its players, so they can't give full scholarships to everybody. But the that rule will go away if this settlement is approved, which means schools can provide a full scholarship to every one of its athletes that it does choose to do so, which I think it's awesome because I always felt like in the past, like they only had a certain amount of scholarships that they could provide. So this
Yeah,
provides, these kids, because they are kids, a way to play the game and get a full ride scholarship, which, at times for the you know, draft prospects, it's great money because it builds your career for the future, and it looks like they are going to limit the number of players and each team could keep, so it avoids like the wealthy schools from sort of taking all the talent and sort of stockpiling it. So there's also a lot I think to be seen, but I think it's a good start. Like you mentioned, I think no matter what NIL money, people, it's always going to be a bidding war. You're going to go who pays you the most, and it's just going to make you think a little bit more of like where should I go? What's going to give me the best opportunity to show off my skills? Because like you mentioned, you could be paid all 20.5 million to go to, North Dakota State, but what do you have around you? How are you going to show the NFL the talent that you're one of the top QBs when you have nobody around you compared to
right.
taking a little bit playing at Ohio State, playing at Michigan, playing at these big name schools. So it's something these kids have to sort of hopefully learn a bit more that it's not just it's about the money, but if you want to make money long term, you have to invest in yourself and find the best situation.
For sure. Yeah. Was there any mention of like a minimum salary per player? Because that might
No,
be something too, that way
yeah,
everybody's kind of involved, like
yeah,
50,000, something like that. Um, but I agree with you. I think that it should become a standard that
hmm
everybody who's on the team gets a full scholarship.
hmm
It takes a lot to be on any of these programs. It's
yeah,
a lot of dedication to mix with your academics. Give them full scholarship. What the heck? You're a lot of walk-ons, like Baker Mayfield, for
hmm
example. He was a walk-on. Look what
yeah,
career he's developed into.
yeah,
Give him a scholarship.
hmm
They battled to get there. Let them get what they
hmm
deserve. So, that's a big one. Um, so let's see if that there's, some type of minimum that they might pay out. That'd be interesting.
hmm
And then yeah, but again, it's this is where that GM role is going to become a
hmm
really big deal, John. I feel like,
yeah.
you have, Andrew Luck at Stanford, you have Ron Rivera now going to Cal. You have Steph getting involved at Davidson. I feel like that this role is now across the board going to become a bigger deal. I feel like this is, literally situating itself to be even more of a minor league professional sport with, involving contracts and
hmm
development of players, and then still having that recruiting aspect, outside of just money,
Yeah.
to go to a certain program. So, I'm curious to see who else, we've talked about this several times on different episodes, starting with, who would you like to have, come into your program to be a GM to,
Yeah.
hey, so and so is now signed. It's going to become such a prominent role.
hmm
And maybe it's a precursor for them to get into professional sports.
Yeah.
Andrew Luck spends X amount of years at Stanford and then he becomes
hmm
the 49ers GM one day. I don't know.
Yeah.
Um, just throwing that out there. John Luck, you're doing okay. Don't worry.
You're doing okay for now. Let's see what you
Yeah,
do this year.
exactly, exactly. But no, just in general, but this is the way to do it. I think it's great. I
hmm
think this is good for college sports. Um, I really enjoy it. Yeah, and it keeps us talking about it. So
hmm
no harm, no
Yeah.
foul.
Yeah. No, no harm, no foul. Yeah. I think the GM position, the way these pro athletes supporting their schools to get players, it's going to be the way. I think it's going to be a lot more better than the NIL money, having that talent to mentor you in the game. Because, like I said, there's going to be a lot of people that want to go to Davidson to learn from Steph because Steph is one of the greatest shooters ever. So, if you want
Yeah,
to learn how to shoot better, want to figure out his tips and tricks, because he will eventually be giving out all his what to do's, you know, people are going to go to Davidson even if they have to take less NIL money.
Yep.
But I like right now I just looked up, what a scholarship at Duke for 4 years would cost, and it's around $333,000.
Dear
So
Lord.
that's a lot of money. So like I say, for these kids that aren't possibly, they could end up being professional if they just work their way up the rankings, but 333K to get, from Duke, one great education to, be able to have for your future if the pro sport you're playing for doesn't pan out, it is a great investment. And like I say, don't knock it if you're looking for the money, because like I say, that's an investment into your future. Because like I say, the NBA longevity, we there's not many people that last as long as LeBron. Sometimes you're just riding the bench, and the next decision is playing overseas in China, Uzbekistan, wherever, Thailand, and barely not even making that much amount of money. So that college investment, I think it's a smart one for some of these players to think about um, in college.
Absolutely. Yeah, in a big example of that is Hunter Renfro. You
I was
know,
about to mention that.
yeah, now he's with recycling in South Carolina,
Hmm.
business development position. He was just a player that, everybody was battling for to get on their fantasy team, getting
Yeah.
over or close to or over 100 receptions that one year
Hmm.
until he had a coach come in and kind of Mike McDaniels come in
Hmm.
there and kind of just mantle him. Um, it's something, it's a good fallback.
Hmm.
You're getting that education. You just mentioned it, $330,000 fully covered.
Hmm.
That in it of itself is tremendous. But then, if you can get a little bit of money on top of that,
Hmm.
power to you.
Yeah.
Have a fallback. I think it's great. So,
Yeah.
yep, get these players what they deserve.
Hmm.
And, this salary cap makes it more competitive. I
Yeah.
like it.
Yeah, I think it'll make it more competitive. It's gonna make it interesting. We'll see what comes out of it, because like I said, it seems like there's still a lot that they're trying to figure out and settle, but I think it's a good start. But like you also mentioned, don't hate the way the NIL's been
Yeah.
making competitive games across all sports. So if it's gonna take 5 years, I'm okay with it taking 5 years. Let's see how this develops.
Sure. Yeah, no, absolutely. Another thing just popped into mind on it real quick is you know, governing, I guess, a lot of this booster money still.
Yeah.
It's like, Joe Schmo drives in with an Escalade on his, $300,000 contract, and then, a guy comes in on a Bugatti. It's like, golly, where'd you get that from? Your NIL is good, but is it that good? And
Yeah.
let's see how they govern that, because
Hmm.
if you're making money, it's under the table stuff will always be something.
Yeah.
So, we'll see. But again, it's governance to an extent that I think is important, but at
Hmm.
least it pays the players. So
Yeah.
that's number one.
Yeah, no, for sure. So we'll see how it goes, but it's always something interesting because we like sports, we like college sports. They're interesting because it's that precursor to them going into the pros and what we watch, in the future. So we'll see where NIL goes, but that's it. And I think the last thing with sports before we go on to our banter gossip, baseball.
Mhm.
Um, how do you feel, Tim, Giants being number one in the NL
Ah,
West? I
oh,
I'm gonna
dude.
ask it, even though it hurts a little bit to say, but how do you feel not being number one finally? For it's just gonna be a few games when we gave you guys a little chance.
Yeah, you know me. We did lose this evening, 2-0. That was rough. Cincinnati Reds dealing both of our losses this year, but I love it. You saw me in the group chat yesterday, being like, "Oh, look who's well, look who's on top." It's short-lived probably.
Hmm.
I think ultimately the Dodgers might set a win record altogether this season. Obviously, the
Hmm.
Padres are off to a really hot start also, but the NL West is just like it's like the NFC West
Hmm.
that was, like 10 years ago. I feel like it has similar feelings of, just a super competitive division,
Hmm.
and it's going to be hard fought till the end. And Buster Posey, tremendous
Hmm.
changes that he's brought in. He's given us Willie Adamas. He's
Yeah.
extended the right players. He's recruited to an extent that, this team just seems different. And Bob Melvin's doing a great job managing this team also. He keeps his teams competitive. And he was a big reason as to why Matt Chapman resigned. So,
Hmm.
we're developing the right things, and I think in the future it'll help us compete with a team like the Dodgers a
Yeah.
little bit better. But we're scrappy, man. We're
Hmm.
we're hanging in there. We swept the Mariners, and we took down the
Hmm.
Astros well, and man, we're
Hmm.
cruising. I think it's
Yeah.
great. Um, Solid team. Look out for the Giants, John. Just
Uh,
just we're there.
it,
We're hanging.
you're hanging. We'll see how it goes with the rest of the season. Like I said, it's a long season. Game
Oh yeah.
wise, they're the
Dodgers
Dodgers
lost
have
today.
the Dodgers lost today to the Nats. Little disappointed about that one. The Nats aren't the strongest team, so we should have been able to win that. Like I said, before that, our two losses were to the Phillies, and the Phillies, I think, are the next big team next to the Dodgers, and the Mets and the Yankees that could win it. So, um, we'll see. Like I said, there's still a lot of baseball, a lot of teams to play. Um, we'll see how our head-to-head matchups go. Same with the Padres. Padres haven't played great teams, so that's why they're winning. They're playing the A's right now. As we know, A's a minor league team.
Yeah,
You
no, they
know,
suck.
they lost to the Cubs, which the Cubs aren't the greatest team, so it shows that they're not fully complete. They're just playing subpar team. So we'll see how it goes. But like I say, wanted to bring it up because they were first for a while till Padres won earlier tonight.
Yep.
Um, but still, it's a tough division. I think it's gonna be a tough division for quite a while. The only division I think that's this close as of right now. I think
Yeah.
American League East is the next one with the Giants, Blue Jays, Red Sox, Orioles, 6 wins between three of them, Baltimore with five. So,
How about Detroit heading up the Central?
yeah,
That's a change.
that's a
Don't
change.
think it'll last, but
I don't think it'll. I think KC is gonna come up and just take that Central, the
even the
West.
Angels.
Yeah, I just
Jeez.
saw that right now. Angels surprisingly
Yep.
doing well. How long could they keep it up? We'll see. I think Seattle has a
Yep.
solid team. I think they could sneak up there.
Yep.
Texas, Texas has always been a solid team.
Atlanta's
Phillies,
dealing with injuries.
yeah. So, and that's like a team that I think eventually can make a big run towards the end if they fix those injuries, they get better.
Definitely. Yeah.
But that could be another division that's a good tough one because the Phillies a strong team, the Mets a strong team, Atlanta a strong team.
Yep.
Um, and then the rest, Cubbies, okay.
Washington's pretty good.
Mhm.
They have some young talent.
Yeah.
Not really hitting stride yet, but they have some good young talent. I think Miami's
Mhm.
going to slip back a lot.
Yeah.
Central Cubbies, I don't know. I really liked their Kyle Tucker
That's
trade.
a yeah,
That
that's
dude's
a good
raking.
move. Yeah.
Yeah,
Kyle
just got to
Tucker
stay
is.
healthy. That's a big one.
Mhm.
I do still think Milwaukee's going to take that division though.
Mhm.
I just think that they're well put together. But yeah, I mean, so far, and then don't count out Arizona. Arizona's a great team too in the NL
No.
West.
Mhm.
So I mean,
Yeah.
and they only got better because with the signing of Corbin Burns this
Mhm.
offseason, he's
Yeah.
Cy Young worthy a lot of years. So
Yeah.
yeah, you know,
Yeah.
that's
Yeah.
it's going to be a hell of a division.
Yeah. Hell of a
It's almost
division. And
unfair.
NL West, I think, will be the best one. It's gonna, like I said, that's gonna come out to the end of the season. I do predict, not just saying because I'm a Dodger fan, but I think Dodgers are
I
gonna
think all of America has the Dodgers.
we could break records, So all the
Yeah,
haters, people saying we're ruining baseball, tell your owners just to pay out more money, or figure out if you guys are
defer.
gonna set up, a salary cap, which I don't think will ever happen in MLB, but just learn how to pay. That's the big thing. Padres, learn how to pay
Yep.
because your roster ain't gonna help you guys. Giants.
Nah,
I like Webb. Webb for you guys.
Logan Webb's great. Yeah.
Like him. I
Yeah,
think
no, he's
that's your
great.
gem.
I had bigger hopes for Camilo Duvall. I have
Hmm
a autographed card with him, but man, he's kind of lost his job as
hmm
closer. Had a rough outing a couple games ago.
hmm
So I don't know. I had higher hopes. I hope he kind of pulls it together. But
hmm
yeah, in Logan Webb we trust for
Yeah.
sure. And Robbie Ray's been a good addition as well so far this
hmm
year. Yeah, injured a lot of last year, but yeah, we have some good aspects to this team, John. I
Yeah.
think we can get it done. Willie Adamas, it's been
Willie
great.
Adamas,
Wilmer
he's been
Flores
playing
off
well.
to a great season so far.
Hmm
Yeah, I do. We have some stuff. We're
Yeah.
scrappy.
You're
That's the way I'll put
scrappy.
it.
Like I say, it'll make it interesting. Like Fidel said, I'd rather deal with you guys than the Padres because these Padre fans are just too much. We're a
Yeah.
lot being Dodger fans, but Padre fans, you guys are just no, get out of here. You aren't even in the
Yeah.
same area as us. Win
No,
some World Series, and then you could join our crew of the Giants
straight
and the
up.
Dodgers.
Exactly. Yeah, they're not even on the same little pedestal.
Yeah.
Yeah, not even close. They can't win when it counts. That's
No.
the issue.
Yeah.
Yep.
But yeah, that's sports wise. And now we'll go into banter gossip. I think we like to gossip.
Oh yeah.
And we had some gossip last week that we were going to continue with today, and that's Lively Baldoni, um, and the documentary from Max. I always want to say HBO Max, but it's called Max now.
It's just Max, yeah.
Just Max. But it's about like a 45-minute or so documentary.
Mhm.
Started watching it, haven't been able to finish it. I think my one big take, and I think you watched it also, or want to hear more from you. Um, appears like it's a lively documentary. It appears like they're trying to set an agenda and push something to the world, but you having watched it all, what do you think of the documentary?
I completely agree. They took a lot of I guess what Baldoni has provided text evidence
Hmm
of, with his website and everything. They've kind of provided a different spin on it, suggesting that, these allegations are legit and, here's why, blah, blah, blah. It definitely seemed one-sided. I
hmm
throughout the whole thing, I actually turned it off with 6 minutes to go because after a statement, regarding, you know, I think a intimate counselor or
hmm
intimate coach,
Coordinator? Or the
a coordinator, sorry, yep,
hmm
coordinator, intimacy coordinator, was discussing, I guess that slow dancing scene
hmm
and how I evidently Baldoni kind of improv some of it, and
hmm
he had hired an intimacy coordinator and
hmm
wanted Lively to attend these meetings, but
hmm
then Lively included that also in her, I guess, rule stipulations that she had for Baldoni, and then wouldn't even show up to the intimacy coordinator meetings.
Oh man.
So, but then they're still, kind of going through backing her up. It seemed like really the only person that was talking in that show that kind of came with a little bit more facts was, I guess, Perez Hilton. Besides that, it kind of seemed like Team Lively the whole time.
hmm
And I think IMDb, I looked it up while I was watching it. IMDb kind of had similar thoughts. It has like 3.5 out of 10 rating on it.
hmm
Every review pretty much goes into saying that it's non-factual bias, and just kind of seemed like a big ploy by Blake Lively,
hmm
and her team, coming through with a lot of this stuff.
Yeah.
And it's I felt like they did certainly try to present a bad picture of Baldoni, especially
hmm
because he's been on TED Talks talking about, how he's kind of against like dominant masculinity
hmm
and, giving a chance to everybody. But, they used that kind of persona that
Okay.
he has and then painted that against him and said like, oh, how could he do this with all these rumors, blah, blah, blah. But they didn't take into account, they talked about her Blake's relationship with like Taylor Swift, for example, best
Yeah.
friends. They didn't talk about the fact that Taylor Swift has kind of cut her out. They
hmm
didn't bring that up at all. They kind of just left it as best
Okay.
friends.
What I
And there's
expected.
certain exactly. So there's certain things like that. that kind of painted it as like, what are we watching here?
Hmm.
Is this truly just an analytical documentary, or is this something that's like, kind of like a ploy or
Hmm.
a propaganda,
Yeah.
to make you a bit more team lively. Obviously everything is allegations. I don't want to
Hmm.
count out either side, but just from how it definitely seemed one-sided.
Yeah. Yeah, and that's interesting, and I think we talked about it last week when we sort of saw it came out that we mentioned which side is reporting this. Is it the lively side? Is this the Baldoni side? And it sounds like it's more the lively side. And I think they're just trying to save face. They're trying to do everything they can to sort of get out of this, make themselves, be be innocent if these allegations are true. Like I said, they're allegations, so we don't know which side's telling the truth, which side isn't. But it's very interesting some of the facts you shared of that documentary. The intimacy coach, I think that's what's talked about a lot with the Baldoni Lively case. Um, and like I say, for me, seeing this come out from like not even like CNN News or like a big media company coming out from like an individual director sort of makes it seem like it was one-sided because I think the best documentary for this whole thing is going to happen after the court case, if it goes to court, gets settled. Because like I say, there's gonna be people that do it from being in the middle, not on either side, mostly just reporting on what information was gathered based on the evidence and how it made people look and sort of give you the answer, almost like the Depp and Heard um court case, the documentary they had after the whole thing was done. I think that's what's going to be the best and the most honest and truthful. But I, if I was Lively and Reynolds, I'd focus on settling. I think it's time for them to sort of just hang it up, move on, pay up whatever you have to. Don't let it go to court because if it does, from the way from what I've seen on social media, news, it's not looking good for them at all.
I completely agree. Yeah, no, that's the smart route, but I
Mhm.
think the egotistical side of it all, they
Yeah.
won't do it.
Yeah.
They're going to take the shit all the way. That's just the way it seems, especially if they say they did go and kind of get a favorable documentary like
Hmm.
this out there, they're going to all depths.
Yeah.
And yeah, that's just the way it's going. But there's a couple more aspects too that kind of just crossed my mind was, one, we kind of talked about this, on Banter Gossip previously, where, and Blake has come out on previous interviews talking about this, where, she talks about how she's, hired to be an actress in a film, but then takes over as a director
Hmm.
and kind of goes, puts herself in a chair that maybe nobody asked for, and I think some of that probably happened to an extent, in this film, for
Hmm.
example, in one of the people that they interviewed, don't know the person's name or their role, but I know that they were close with the film, and they kind of talked about how, it's not against the law for Blake to step into a role like that, and it's like, of,
Yeah.
of course it's not, but it's not something that I don't think Baldoni was really asking for to an extent where, the person that they were interviewing kind of said like, she did no wrong. She was stepping in to try to make the movie seem better. It was bettering the film. In her eyes, it could have been bettering the film, but maybe
Yeah.
Baldoni had a different opinion
Hmm.
on that, and they kind of talked about the mixing of the film, where he didn't really have any say, and it was kind of that last minute thing where they had to pay, a lot of these editors obscene amount of money to get
Yeah.
this film done in the right amount of time, right? So, he seemed probably justifiably frustrated by that,
Hmm.
being pulled from a role that he's worked hard on. And, it's kind of critiquing your work, acting like you're not
Yeah.
giving the best product out there, with all
Hmm.
your hard work. So, yeah, probably a little irritating there, and then, what was the other one? they kind of talked about like, the basement thing and
Hmm.
how that, he didn't even get to enjoy the premiere night and how he was put into the basement and, just that whole aspect. But yeah, in general, that was really bad luck. And then there was one other one. Oh yeah, and then they talked about his 2 a.m. voice memo that he had sent, and how he said, I don't know if it was necessarily him fessing up to anything, but he was just kind of talking about, how he was, somewhat apologetic, I guess, trying to be, more,
Hmm.
understanding with Blake's situation,
Hmm.
and but then they kind of painted that 2 a.m. message as being creepy. And that there's a big persona out there of that, and they're just trying to display the ick, I
Yeah.
guess, is the best way to put it. And then in there, they didn't even really acknowledge the fact that he's just trying to be understanding. It was more
Hmm.
or less, ew, why is he messaging at 2 a.m.?
Yeah. Yeah. And that's interesting because I think about it. I'm like, man, if I'm going through all this, I'm not sleeping, and then it's like
Yeah.
you're doing stuff at 2 a.m. and a lot of these stars are doing work at 2, 3 a.m. They don't sleep at night, they sleep in the day.
Oh yeah.
So why is it an ick when that's the MO, as a creator, as someone who does movies and stuff, if you're making a movie and you're just laying in bed at 2 thinking about your movie and you come up with this idea, you're gonna go and email it to all the producers, everybody at 2, 3 a.m., whatever time it is, because you want to freshen your mind and you want to share it
Hmm.
because it's like, I don't want to forget about this, go to sleep, and then, wait, what was I thinking of?
Right.
So it's like, it's not really a nick, and it's just sort of like, come on, you guys. And like you said, sort of painting it one way, making him look, creepy, but I don't see it as that way, you know.
Yeah. And let's dig into the texts. How
Yeah.
often did Blake message at that
Yeah.
hour?
Yeah.
Maybe it was okay for them.
Yeah.
It's okay for some people. If Blake certainly had a lot of rules. Where's the rule for not texting at
Mhm.
2 a.m.?
Yeah.
You
Yeah.
know, it's
It's great. And also, how do you know where Blake was compared to where Baldoni was?
sure.
How about if
Yeah.
Baldoni was in LA, Blake was in New York, or
Yeah.
vice
5
versa,
a.m.
it's
Yeah.
it's different time zones. So it's like they're making a big deal out of something that I don't think is going to be a big deal. I think it's
No,
more a lot of the context of some of the other things that is really going to take this further. And like I say, these are all allegations. We don't know what's going to come out of it, but it's just not looking good for Lively. Even Reynolds, with all the Deadpool stuff, I'm hearing Deadpool. I enjoyed the movie. I didn't put it together when I saw the nice pool, but now that I sort of rewatch it, hear everything, I'm like, uh, you, it's a little petty. Like, man, you guys really did this and thought you guys were gonna get away with it scot-free. Like, no, it's gonna bite you guys.
big time. Yeah, no, and I think that they're realizing it, and I don't know. Maybe they'll bring this documentary into it too.
Yeah.
Let's see, because this is all media before
Yeah.
you're leading up to a court case.
Hmm.
So, and a big thing is they were talking about that slow dancing scene and
Hmm.
how that will be played in front of a jury. It's like,
Yeah.
okay, you can play it in front of a jury, but let's see the supporting evidence of that scene, what was discussed amongst them
Hmm.
too.
Yeah.
Yeah. So I don't know. It seemed like they were painting the big ick on Baldoni.
Yeah.
uh, it seemed interesting. We'll put it that way.
Yeah, it's interesting, and it's going to be an interesting case when it happens. I think last I read, it got pushed a year, right, to next year.
I think you're right. It did
The
get
case.
delayed quite a bit.
Yeah. So, like I say, I don't know if this is them playing a different game. But my suggestion, if it's not looking good for Lively Reynolds, just settle. Get this out of
Yep,
just move on, forget about it, or try to forget about it, because if you go the whole way and it doesn't end up the way you want it to, it's gonna be worse for you guys in the long term.
for sure. Yeah, take the road Drake did, and I
Hmm.
guess now on the Drake thing, comes out with that song that's super well played right now, and
Hmm.
on the back end, I guess he's going to be getting a lot of rights, and with his record company, and is
Hmm.
I guess able to see a lot of high-ranking officials' text messages or messages that we're going about. So, um, if you take the Drake route,
Hmm.
it's not always bad. You
No.
can take an L in some places, but
Hmm.
come out and top in others. So,
Yeah.
we'll see what happens.
Yeah. I think take a play from the Dead Bird Amber Heard uh trial. It didn't end up well for Amber Heard, and she ended up losing a lot of movie roles because of something like this. So
Yep.
you see the outcome if it doesn't end up well for you. If you're banking on it that it is, I hope you guys have enough evidence you're getting consulted correctly, because if not, it's not going to be good.
No, definitely not.
Hmm.
Yeah. Yeah. No shame in settling. Might be worth
Yeah,
it after a while.
yeah, yeah. And then someone else that's been in court before, was in court quite a while ago, even went to federal prison for it. Um, Billy McFarland, Firefest 2,
Yeah.
and some updates with it. There's been a lot of rumors. I think they are two months away from the supposed
Less
Firefest.
than 2 months.
A little less than two
Yep.
months now. Um, but I know he is doubling down still that this festival is still going on. Um, I think it went from Isla de Mujeres, where they said that they have no permits yet for this Firefest, and then Billy McFarland said it's getting changed to Playa del Carmen. Now Playa del
Hmm.
Carmen saying that there's no event of this name that's going to be held at Playa del Carmen. So what is going on, Tim? What do you think is happening?
Dude, it's crazy. It just seems like Scam City
Mm-hmm.
2.0. It's
2.0.
it's the same exact story on repeat. It's, and I sent you a video this past week, John, where, he was going to come out with this big announcement
Yeah.
of more people, but he went on just to ramble for a minute,
Mm-hmm.
not saying any names, doing
No.
anything. It was just a repeat of everything that he had. I think Good Morning America went on his website to try to purchase tickets. Uh, Long story short, they didn't end up purchasing any tickets. And if they had any questions, I think that there was only an email, but there was no like phone number contact. So God knows when you'd ever receive an email back from anybody. And then, like you said, there's
Yeah.
nothing to support anything that's happening. I think
No.
Antonio Brown is the only name that we've heard. Outside of that, God knows where it's going to be held, because all of these, you know,
Mm-hmm.
organizers and in places that they're trying to organize it in are denying any paperwork whatsoever. So it's
Yeah.
just all make believe still, nothing factual. You're having all these news outlets catching on with this, and then it's just becoming a bigger deal. So it's like
Mm-hmm.
this dude's backing himself into a corner. But the crazy thing is you mentioned after federal prison everything, he's still doubling down.
Mm-hmm.
I don't know what is going on up there in the noggin with McFarland, but obviously he's learned nothing. And I just wonder at what point does he have somebody in his team or in his life that just tells him like, dude, it's not working.
Yeah.
Try again somewhere else or at another time.
Yeah.
And or just find something else to do, because these fire fests, it
It's
doesn't even
not.
seem that good. It's
No.
just like it's I'd rather just do EDC,
Yeah.
or Ultra. It just seems more interesting than this is.
Yeah. It's crazy because the way I think of it is like this guy, I haven't looked it up closely, but I feel like he's still like on some sort of like house arrest. The federal government's still sort of watching him. So why isn't the federal government looking into this more? Because it's Firefest, the first one. It's fraud pretty much if it doesn't work out the way he's saying it is, and he's gonna end up back in jail the federal government's gonna have to deal with this again. So why not just stop it before it gets so bad? Because one of the things I saw on a news report is that on the website, if you purchase tickets, it says no refunds or exchanges at all. So
Oof.
even if the artist cancels, even if everybody cancels, you're not getting no refunds or exchanges. So this just sounds like some sort of scheme for them to get money and get money from people that most of these people I think have money that are going to it because they're interested in it, but it's also like you guys are crazy doing that with that kind of money. I'm like, if I had
Absolutely.
that kind of money, I wouldn't. Like he said, I'd be going to Ultra, I'd be going to EDC, Coachella. Coachella is sounding a lot more awesome right now too. Some of the lineups, some of these surprise artists. So yeah, Firefest, Billy McFarland. If you guys have bought tickets, let us know why you're so interested in going to this festival that has no information on it yet.
Yeah, please. I'm really curious if we could get anybody that's purchased any level of ticket for this event. All are extremely expensive for
Yeah,
a mystery event.
event.
Please let us know. No harm, no foul, no judgment.
Mm,
Just genuinely curious. What drew you to wanting to purchase a ticket,
mhm.
and that's really it. And just kind of figuring out, just what your belief is in the event altogether. So, yeah, again, just it's gone from bad to worse, I feel like. And
Mhm.
if this dude's busted again, like holy smokes, this
Yeah.
dude might not even get out of prison next time.
No, I don't think he'll get out of prison. I'm curious because it sounds like they're gonna announce artists eventually. I'm curious once they start saying names. I want to go to these artists' pages and sort of see if they're backing it up or if they're like, yeah, this is all fake. Because that's gonna be a big tell of
Oh yeah.
of them being like, what the hell is this guy talking about? Or no, yeah, we are going. And if they are going, I'm curious why too.
Yeah, absolutely. Yeah, in only 2 months left to go. It's going to be held last weekend of May.
Yeah.
It's less than 2 months.
Hmm.
Like, has Antonio Brown even come out with anything to support
I
that
don't
he's
think
going,
so.
or
Not that
haven't
I've
seen
heard.
anything?
Yeah.
Yeah. So that's crazy too. And then
Yeah.
evidently there's going to be UFC fighters attending,
Hmm.
right?
Yeah.
You can get trained by them or something.
Hmm.
Dude, like I don't know. It's crazy. I think you're better off like vacationing Playa del Carmen and just during that same exact time frame and seeing if anything's even going on. That might be better. But I don't know. Crazy. We'll can you continue to keep everybody updated, but in the
Hmm.
meantime, like you said, if there's anybody who's bought tickets, please let us know. Just what drew you to it, what made you buy
Hmm.
them, and what you're looking most forward to. I think
Yeah.
would be great to hear.
Yeah. And like I say, no judgment, on the pod
Yeah,
or whenever we talk to you. Like we are just very fascinated. Why? Because we have our feelings, but like I said, we're never going to judge people for their thoughts and doing stuff because it's your money in the end, and you could do
of
whatever you
course.
want. And if that's what you want to do, that's what you want to do.
The free world.
But yeah, Firefest. It wouldn't be my cup of tea just because of the track record. Like I say, Coachella sounding really good. I think Weezer's gonna perform. There's a lot of
Yep.
people coming up. It seems like Coachella is gonna be a big event this year, and you know, I heard Cascade talking on a podcast, I think it was, where he says Coachella is one of the biggest music festivals because it's where a lot of artists start their tours.
Mm,
That's the start of their tour. So everybody that plays is pretty much going on tour within that year. So
wow.
it they need to have a great performance at Coachella to be able to sell tickets for the tour when it goes to a city near you. So that's that was something very interesting for me to hear of like how some people see Coachella and why it makes it still, even when some of the lineups don't look that great, one of the premier uh events to go to, music festival wise.
That's a great way to think about it. And a name that just popped in my mind was Selena Gomez. With her new album,
Hmm.
if she's going to perform at Coachella this upcoming
Hmm.
year, you know, is that going to be a start to her,
Hmm.
tour? And, Benny Blanco, I saw that he posted something about like a rave that he was at and, but he put, I think Bluest Flame over it, instead of the music at the event, and just said like, imagine this.
Yeah.
And I think it'd be sick. It's a
Hmm.
great song. So, um,
Yeah.
I'm all for it. That's a really interesting thing to look at it
Hmm.
that way, though.
Hmm.
That's really cool that Cascade mentioned that because I never thought about it that way,
Yeah.
but it makes total sense. It's a big
Hmm.
event, and what a way to start it off your tour.
Yeah. Yeah. So it'll be interesting. I know every year I watch the videos of people at Coachella just because I haven't gone. Like I say, bucket
Yep,
listing for me to go to Coachella one day,
for sure.
vlog from there, show it off, and just enjoy it too. Because like I said, it seems like a fun environment. So that is one I think music festival that I'll suggest that people go to. Spend your money on that. Don't spend it on Firefest until they have a better track record. Because as of right now, the track record is not looking good.
No, no, and there's no good updates.
Yeah. No good
Looks like
updates.
rambling.
Yeah. Or unless you like Antonio Brown.
Yeah,
Yeah.
big AB fans out there. I
Yeah.
don't know.
But yeah, that's the banter gossip. After that, there hasn't been much gossip in the news. Like I said, it's been quiet. It's been some quiet weeks,
Mhm.
with a lot of stuff, sports, news. Like I say, movies. Summertime's coming up, so I think we're excited. We'll talk about some of these blockbusters, give our reviews a few weeks after, just so we don't spoil anything for anybody.
Mhm.
Because like I say, we don't want to play spoiler for you guys. But anything else, Tim? Come up that you've seen? I say,
No, just a little bit with the Drake stuff. Haven't
mhm.
looked a whole lot into it, so maybe as more comes out, we can talk about that as
Yeah.
well, maybe in a future banter gossip. But that was kind of garnering some attention.
Hmm.
I do enjoy that song Nokia by Drake.
Yeah.
I think that's a
Yeah.
fun one. But that's about it. Not too much more on the Biebs.
Hmm.
Saw him sitting solo at a cafe the other day, I guess,
Hmm. Yeah.
seemed good.
Seems to be
Hopefully
doing
he's on a
good.
good
So
track
yeah.
and
Yeah, that's
yeah.
good. Yeah. But yeah, that's the show. Like I say, a little bit of a slower week. We're always trying to find new stuff. So like I say, March Madness is gone, but the NBA finals are up and coming. So we'll start having a little NBA finals preview or playoff preview.
Oh yeah,
Go from there. We're trying to get some buddies on that really follow basketball to sort of talk about some of these teams, what they have seen, and just give us some insight from their point of view. Uh, and then I think hockey too. Hockey playoffs come around the same time NBA does, so it'll be fun to watch both of those playoffs.
definitely. Yeah,
Mhm.
stoked on both. This is a perfect example of us being able to watch a little bit more hockey, get
Yeah.
into the NBA playoffs. It's needed for this podcast, so I'm
Hmm.
excited to watch it and kind of get involved. Go
Yeah,
Warriors.
for sure. Yeah, for sure. But yeah, so thank you everybody that joined us. As always, if you haven't subscribed on YouTube, please hit that subscribe button below. If you're listening on Apple Podcasts, please hit that follow button. Get those alerts when new episodes do drop. And as always, leave your comments, leave your thoughts, leave your takes. We enjoy engaging with you guys, having those conversations, having that friendly banter through the comments. And as always, we do appreciate everybody that's always been listening, following us, supporting us. We're truly grateful and thankful for you guys.
Yep, lots of new ones out there. So,
Hmm.
I really appreciate all the support and it certainly just we're already motivated to do this week in, week out, but
Yeah.
just that added push is always great and love to see it. Love meeting new
Yeah.
people. Don't be shy.
Hmm.
Definitely drop the
Yeah.
drop the comment, whatever it may be.
Yeah. Yeah. Don't be shy. We enjoy it. But yeah, thank you everybody. Enjoy the week. Hopefully there's some fun sports, and if not, we'll give you guys some more gossip, interesting news next week. But yeah, take
Oh
care.
yeah. Peace.
Peace.